Hello there. How are you tonight? Before we begin, gently dim the lights, settle into your bed, and let the noise of the day slowly fade away. Because tonight's story is best experienced in calm and quiet, and if you enjoy these slow journeys into the past, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. So there's always another slightly boring history story waiting for you when sleep feels just out of reach, and let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from tonight, now? Imagine a world without alarm clocks, without soft mattresses, without electricity. A world where sleep itself followed very different rules. Tonight, we travel back to the medieval era. A time of candlelight, cold stone walls, and long, silent nights. But what if I told you? People didn't sleep the way we do today. In fact, many would fall asleep, only to wake again in the middle of the night. Not in panic, but as part of a natural rhythm. Some shared beds with family, or even strangers. Others feared the darkness, believing spirits and unseen forces wandered through the night. Sleep was not just rest. It was shaped by fear, tradition, survival, and habits that might seem strange to us today. So as you relax and drift deeper into comfort, let's quietly explore the unusual and fascinating sleep habits of medieval people and discover how different the night once was. The sun has slipped below the horizon, not gradually, as it feels in our world of glowing screens and artificial light, but completely, suddenly, as if someone has closed a great curtain over the sky. Darkness arrives quickly here. There are no streetlights humming to life, no distant glow from cities, no flicker of televisions behind curtains. Only the faint shimmer of stars, scattered across a vast and endless sky. Inside a small medieval home, the final embers of the fire begin to dim. The warmth they gave is already fading, retreating into the stone and timber that hold the chill of the night. A single candle might still burn, its flame unsteady, casting long, wavering shadows that seem to stretch and breathe along the walls. This is night, as it once was, not a background to life, but a force that reshaped it. In this world, sleep is not something scheduled or optimized. It is not tracked, measured, or improved. It arrives when the body surrenders to darkness and leaves just as naturally. People do not go to bed in the way we understand it. Instead, they drift. The day ends not with a routine, but with a quiet acceptance. Work slows. Conversations soften. The body, tired from labor, begins to yield to the pull of rest. There is no precise hour, no glowing numbers marking time, only the deepening dark, and the quiet understanding that it is time to sleep. But even this is not as simple as it seems. Because in the medieval night, sleep does not come all at once, and it does not stay. Somewhere beyond the walls, the wind moves softly through the trees. A dog barks in the distance. Perhaps an owl calls into the silence, its voice low and echoing. These are not disturbances, they are part of the night's language. For those who lived in this time, silence was never complete. It was layered, alive in subtle, shifting ways, and within that living silence, the human mind began to change. Without constant light, the senses sharpened. Shadows seen deeper. Sounds carried farther. The imagination, untethered by distraction, wandered into unfamiliar places. It is here that the night becomes something more than darkness. It becomes a presence. For some, it is peaceful, a time of rest, of stillness, of quiet breathing beneath heavy blankets. For others, it is something less certain, because when the world goes dark, what remains unseen begins to feel closer. The corners of a room seem longer. The spaces between sounds grow heavier. Every creak of wood, every shift of wind, carries a question with it. What was that? And yet, despite this unease, people did not resist the night. They lived with it. They accepted its rhythms, its interruptions, its strange patterns. Sleep, in this world, was not a single unbroken journey. It was something else entirely, something divided, something shared, something shaped by the limits of light and the weight of the unknown. As you lie here now, in your own quiet space, surrounded by comforts they could never imagine. It's almost difficult to understand, but slowly, gently, that understanding begins to form, because the night, steady, predictable, controlled, is a very modern invention. For most of human history, the dark held a different meaning. It guided when people slept, when they woke, and even how they dreamed. And tonight, as we move deeper into this story, you may begin to feel that difference for yourself, not all at once, but in small, quiet ways, a shift in how you imagine the dark, a subtle awareness of silence, a sense that sleep might not always have been what it is now. And as the candlelight fades, and the cold edges of night settle in, we begin to understand something simple, and yet strangely unfamiliar. The medieval night was not just longer, it was deeper, and we are only just beginning to step inside it. The night does not begin when you decide it should, it begins when the sun disappears, and in the medieval world, that moment changes everything. There is no gentle resistance against darkness here. No lamps switched on. No glowing screens pushing the night away. When daylight fades, life itself begins to fold inward. Slowly at first, and then all at once. Imagine standing at the edge of a village as evening settles in. The sky, once pale and open, deepens into shades of amber, then violet, and finally something darker, heavier. The last light clings to the horizon for only a short while before it vanishes completely, and with it, the day is over. Inside homes, people move quickly now, but not with panic. With familiarity. With a quiet understanding that time is running out, because light, in this world, is not easy to keep. A candle must be made, or bought at cost. A fire must be fed with wood that took time and effort to gather. Every flicker of flame is valuable, and every moment it burns is a small expense, so light is used carefully, not wasted. A single candle might be shared by an entire household. Its glow is faint, barely reaching the corners of the room. Shadows gather easily, stretching into long shapes that shift with every movement. The fire offers more warmth than light. Its glow is low and uneven, illuminating faces in brief, soft pulses before letting them fade again into darkness. There is no brightness here, only fragments of it, and because of this, people live differently. Evenings are shorter. Conversations are quieter. Tasks that require vision are set aside. There is no staying up late to work, no stretching the day beyond its natural limits. The body begins to listen to something older than habit. It listens to the sun. As darkness deepens, a subtle heaviness settles in. Not exhaustion exactly, but a gentle pull. The kind that cannot be ignored for long. It is the body responding to the absence of light. Without artificial brightness to interrupt it, the mind begins to slow. Thoughts soften. The sharp edges of the day begin to blur, and sleep approaches naturally, not forced. Not delayed, simply accepted. But the darkness does more than guide when people sleep. It changes how they experience the world. Step outside now, away from the small circle of firelight. Let your eyes adjust. At first, there is almost nothing. Only shapes within shapes. Outlines that refuse to become clear. The ground beneath your feet feels less certain. The air itself seems thicker, quieter, but then, slowly, the night reveals itself. Stars emerge, countless and sharp. The sky feels larger than it ever does in the modern world, an endless field stretching far beyond understanding. The moon, when it appears, transforms everything. Fields glow faintly. Paths become visible again. Shadows soften, and the world regains a fragile kind of form, but on nights without it, the darkness is complete, and in that complete darkness, something shifts within the human mind. Without constant light, people become more aware of subtle things. The sound of wind brushing against wood, the distant movement of animals, the quiet rhythm of breathing in a shared room, these are not distractions. They are the environment. They shape the experience of being awake and of falling asleep. Even time itself begins to feel different. There are no glowing clocks marking each passing minute. No alarms waiting to interrupt the silence. Time is sensed, not measured, a feeling rather than a number. People know the night has deepened not by looking at a device, but by the way the air cools, by the way the fire burns lower, by the way their own thoughts begin to drift, and because of this, sleep is not rigid, it flows, it bends around the natural rhythm of darkness. You might begin to understand now why their nights were so different from ours, because when light disappears, the world becomes simpler, but also more uncertain. There is less to do, but more to feel. The mind is left alone with itself for longer stretches of time. There are no endless distractions to fill the quiet, no constant stream of noise to push thoughts away, and so the night becomes a space for reflection, for imagination, for an ease, for rest, all at once. As you lie here now, surrounded by controlled light and familiar comforts, it may feel distant, almost impossible to fully imagine, but somewhere within you, that older rhythm still exists, a quiet response to darkness, a natural slowing, a readiness for sleep that does not need to be forced. And as the medieval night stretches on, uninterrupted, unbroken, we begin to see that this absence of light did not just change when people slept, it changed how they slept, because in a world ruled by darkness, sleep was never a single, simple act. It was something shaped by the rise and fall of night itself, and soon you'll discover just how unusual that rhythm truly was. By now, the night has settled fully around you, the last traces of movement have faded. The fire has softened into a quiet glow. The small sounds of the world, distant footsteps, murmured voices, the shifting of wood, have gradually disappeared into something deeper, something slower. This is the moment where, in the medieval world, sleep begins, not as a single, unbroken descent into morning, but as the first part of something more unusual, something almost forgotten. Imagine lying down in a dimly lit room, wrapped in rough blankets, the faint warmth of the fire barely reaching you now. The air is cool, still. Around you, others are settling as well, family, perhaps, or even strangers sharing the same narrow space. There is no ritual to mark the exact beginning, no set bedtime, only the quiet agreement that the day is done, and so you close your eyes. Sleep comes quickly here, not because life is easier, but because it is more physically demanding. The body, worn from hours of labor, yields easily to rest. Muscles relax. Breathing deepens. The mind drifts without resistance. This is what we might call the first sleep. It is deep, heavy, undisturbed, for a time, and then something unexpected happens. You wake up, not suddenly, not with alarm, but gently, as if rising through layers of quiet. Your eyes open to darkness. The fire is now only embers, glowing faintly. The room is still. The breathing of others fills the space in slow, steady rhythms. For a moment, you might not even question it, because this waking is normal. This is not insomnia. This is not a problem to solve. This is simply the space between sleeps. Historians today often refer to this pattern as segmented sleep, a natural rhythm in which the night is divided into two distinct periods of rest, but to those living it, it needed no name. It was just the way things were. You lie there, awake but calm. There is no urgency to return to sleep, no frustration, no glowing clock reminding you how many hours remain until morning. Time, once again, feels different here, slower, softer. You might turn slightly, adjusting to the coolness of the air. Perhaps you listen to the quiet crackle of dying embers, to the faint wind outside, to the distant, almost imperceptible sounds of the night continuing without you. And in this space between sleeps, the mind behaves differently. It is not fully alert, but it is not fully at rest. Thoughts drift in unusual ways, less structured, more fluid. Memories surface gently. Ideas move without effort, without pressure. It is a state that feels almost in between worlds. Some people might use this time quietly, a whispered conversation, a moment of reflection, a simple awareness of being awake in the middle of the night, without needing to explain why. Others might do nothing at all, just lie there, breathing, existing. waiting, and then, just as naturally as you woke, sleep returns. This is the second sleep, softer than the first. Lighter, perhaps, but still deeply restorative. The body settles again. The mind drifts once more into dreams, and when morning comes, it does not feel like waking from a single stretch of rest, but from something more layered, more complete in a different way. This rhythm, first sleep, waking, second sleep, was once widespread across much of the world. It was shaped not by culture alone, but by biology. In the absence of artificial light, the human body often falls into this pattern naturally. Darkness stretches longer, and sleep adapts to fill it, not in one continuous block, but in two. But over time, this pattern faded. As light became easier to control, as nights grew shorter and more structured, sleep was compressed into a single, uninterrupted expectation, and the quiet waking in the middle of the night became something to fix, something to worry about, something to avoid. Yet here, in the medieval night, it is something else entirely. It is a pause, a breath between dreams, a moment where the world is still, and you are simply awake within it. No pressure, no noise, no urgency. Just the quiet presence of the night, holding you gently between one sleep and the next. As you rest now, listening to this story, you might begin to notice something subtle, a shift in how you think about waking in the dark, a sense that perhaps it isn't always a disturbance, that maybe, long ago, it was part of a rhythm we have almost forgotten. And as the second sleep slowly takes hold once more, the night continues, deeper, quieter, carrying us forward into its hidden hours, where being awake was not unusual at all, but expected. There is a moment, deep within the night, when everything feels suspended, not asleep, not fully awake, just present. You find yourself there now. The second chapter of sleep has not yet begun, and the first has already passed. The darkness around you is thick, almost tangible, like a quiet presence resting gently against the walls. This is the hour most people today would resist, the hour they might reach for a phone, check the time, sigh softly in frustration, and try to force sleep to return. But here, in the medieval world, this moment is not resisted, it is accepted, even understood. Your eyes open slowly. There is no sudden awareness, no sharp return to consciousness. Instead, it feels as though you have drifted upward, surfacing gently from deep water. The room is dim, barely visible. The fire has settled into a low, steady glow. Its light pulses faintly, just enough to reveal shapes without defining them. Figures nearby are still, wrapped in blankets, their breathing slow and rhythmic. You are not alone, but you are awake, and that is perfectly normal. There is no urgency to move. No need to question why you are here, in this quiet space between sleeps. The night itself seems to hold you in place, as though encouraging stillness rather than action. Time stretches. Without clocks, without schedules, this waking moment has no clear beginning or end. It simply exists. For as long as it needs to, you might shift slightly, adjusting to the coolness that has settled into the room. The warmth of earlier hours has faded, replaced by a soft chill that brushes against your skin. Somewhere outside, a sound breaks the silence, a distant rustle, perhaps the wind moving through dry leaves, or an animal passing unseen through the dark. Your senses, no longer dulled by constant stimulation, begin to notice everything: the faint creak of wood as the house settles, the whisper of air slipping through small gaps in the walls, the subtle rhythm of your own breathing. In this moment, the world feels larger, even though you remain still. And for many in the medieval night, this time was not simply endured, it was used, not with urgency or purpose in the modern sense, but gently, quietly, as if guided by instinct. Some would rise, carefully, so as not to disturb others. They might tend to the fire, adding a small piece of wood, coaxing the embers back to life. The brief flare of light would dance across the room, casting shadows that stretch and retreat like silent companions. Others might whisper, soft conversations, barely louder than breath, shared between those who happen to wake at the same time. Words exchanged without hurry, Thoughts that feel easier to express in the calm isolation of night. There is something about this hour that invites honesty, a kind of openness that daylight rarely allows. And then, there are those who remain where they are, eyes open, mind drifting, not thinking in the structured way we often do. But wandering, this is a different kind of awareness, dreamlike, but conscious. Ideas appear and fade without effort. Memories surface in fragments, faces, places, moments, unfolding slowly before dissolving again into the dark. It is a quiet, internal landscape, one that feels almost hidden, as though it belongs only to this space between sleeps. In later centuries, some would describe this state as deeply creative, a time when the mind is free from distraction, yet not bound by logic. But here, it is simply part of life, unremarkable, expected. And yet, there is something else in this hour, something less comforting, because the same stillness that invites reflection also leaves room for unease. The darkness, though familiar, is never fully known. Beyond the thin walls of the home, the world is unseen. The boundaries between what is real and what is imagined feel softer here. A shadow might seem to move when it does not. A distant sound might linger longer than it should. And in a time where the unknown is often explained through belief rather than certainty, the night carries a weight that is difficult to ignore. You may feel it now, just slightly, that quiet tension beneath the calm, not fear exactly, but awareness, a sense that the night is vast, and you are only a small part of it. And yet, even this feeling is accepted, because there is no escaping the night, only living within it. Gradually, slowly, the body begins to respond again. The mind, having wandered its quiet paths, starts to soften. The edges of awareness blur. Thoughts lose their shape. Sleep returns, not forced, not chased, but welcomed. You close your eyes once more, and the second sleep begins to take hold, gentle, unhurried, as though the night itself is guiding you back into rest. And as you drift deeper again, leaving behind this brief moment of wakefulness, you may begin to understand something subtle but profound, that in the medieval world, waking in the night was not a problem to solve. It was a part of the rhythm, a quiet interlude, a space where the mind could breathe before returning once more to dreams. And as that understanding settles in, the darkness around you feels just a little less empty. Before sleep ever begins, there is the evening, a quiet, narrowing space between the labor of the day and the long stretch of darkness that follows. It is here, in these fading hours, that light becomes something fragile, something temporary. The sun has already disappeared beyond the horizon, and with it, the certainty of visibility. What remains now is not daylight, but a softer, more uncertain glow. Firelight, candlelight, small, flickering sources that push back the dark, but never fully defeat it. Imagine stepping into a medieval home at this hour. The air carries the faint scent of smoke and earth. The walls, wood, stone, or a mixture of both, absorb the dim light rather than reflect it. Shadows gather easily in corners, lingering like quiet observers. At the center of the room, a fire burns low, not roaring, not bright, but steady. Its flames move slowly, curling and shifting with a rhythm that feels almost hypnotic. Each flicker casts a different shape across the room, stretching shadows into long, wavering forms that seem to breathe along the walls. Nearby, perhaps, a single candle stands. Its flame is even smaller, more delicate. It trembles at the slightest movement of air, as if aware of how easily it could vanish. This is not light as we know it. It does not flood a space. It does not eliminate darkness. It coexists with it, and because of this, everything feels different. Faces are only partially illuminated, eyes catching the light for a moment before slipping back into shadow. Objects appear and disappear depending on where the flame moves. Nothing is fully clear, nothing is fully hidden. It is a world of half-light, and in this half-light, life slows. There is little reason to continue working. Tasks that require precision or focus become difficult, even dangerous. Tools are set aside. Movement becomes more careful, more deliberate. Instead, the evening becomes something quieter, more contained. people gather closer, not out of tradition, but necessity. The reach of light is limited, and to step beyond it is to step into darkness. Conversations happen within that small circle. Voices are softer now, shaped by the calm of the hour. There is no rush, no urgency to fill the silence. Words come slowly, comfortably, as if the night itself encourages restraint, and the body begins to respond. This kind of light does not stimulate the mind in the way modern light does. It does not signal alertness or prolong activity. Instead, it soothes. The flicker of flame, steady and rhythmic, draws the eyes. It holds attention gently, without demanding it. Over time, the mind begins to mirror that rhythm, slowing, softening, letting go of the sharper edges of thought. You might feel it now, just imagining it, that quiet pull toward stillness, the heaviness behind the eyes. The subtle release of tension. This is how the evening prepares the body for sleep, not through routine or discipline, but through atmosphere, through light itself. But there is something else hidden within this dim glow, something less obvious, because firelight, for all its warmth, is unpredictable. A sudden shift in the flame can send shadows jumping across the room. A draft of air can make the candle flicker wildly, distorting shapes into something unfamiliar. For a brief moment, the ordinary becomes uncertain. A hanging cloth might seem to move on its own, a shadow might stretch farther than it should, and in a world where darkness already holds mystery, these small distortions carry weight. They are noticed, felt, even if they are not spoken of. So while the firelight brings comfort, it also reminds those gathered of what lies beyond it. The unseen, the undefined, the night, waiting just outside the circle of glow. Eventually, the decision is made, not with words, but with a shared understanding. The light will not last forever. Candles must be conserved. Firewood is valuable. There is no reason to stretch the evening longer than necessary. One by one, small actions begin. A candle is gently extinguished, its smoke curling upward in a thin, fading line. The fire is allowed to settle, its flames shrinking into quiet embers. The room darkens, not suddenly, but gradually, as if the light itself is withdrawing, and with it, the world grows simpler. Details disappear. Edges soften. The visible fades into suggestion. This is the final step before sleep, not a transition marked by time, but by the disappearance of light. As you lie here now, surrounded by steady illumination that never flickers, it's easy to forget how powerful this change once was, how deeply light shaped the mind, how naturally it guided the body toward rest. And as the last glow of firelight dims in that distant medieval room, and darkness settles fully into place, you begin to understand something quiet, but profound. Sleep did not begin when people decided it should. It began when the light was gone, and in that gentle surrender to darkness, the night truly began to take hold. By the time the last traces of firelight have faded, the room has changed, not in structure, but in feeling. What was once a shared space of quiet conversation and flickering light has now become something more intimate, more confined. A place shaped entirely by darkness and proximity, because in the medieval world, homes were small, much smaller than what we are used to. Imagine a single-room dwelling, its walls made of rough timber or cold stone, the ceiling low enough that sound never quite escapes. The floor beneath you may be packed earth, uneven and cool, holding onto the chill of the night. There are no separate bedrooms here, no private corners. Everything, cooking, eating, resting, happens within the same limited space. And now, everyone is settling into sleep. You are not alone, not even close. Family members lie side by side, close enough to feel each other's warmth, to hear each breath, each small movement. In some homes, there may be more people than space comfortably allows. Children, parents, perhaps even extended relatives, bodies arranged carefully, not for comfort, but for fit. Every inch matters. There is a quiet negotiation in how people settle. A shifting of limbs, a soft adjustment of blankets, a whispered murmur as someone turns to find a position that works within the limits of the space, and eventually, stillness. But it is not the kind of stillness we know. Here, stillness is shared. You feel the presence of others even with your eyes closed. the warmth beside you, the faint rhythm of breathing, the occasional shift as someone turns in their sleep. Privacy, as we understand it, does not exist here. There is no closing a door, no isolating yourself from the world. Even your dreams unfold within earshot of others, and yet, this closeness is not unusual, it is simply life. In fact, there is a certain comfort in it. The presence of others provides warmth against the cold that creeps into the room as the night deepens. It offers reassurance in a world where darkness can feel vast and uncertain. You are not facing the night alone, still. The lack of space brings its own challenges. The air grows heavy more quickly. With multiple bodies in one room, the warmth becomes uneven, too cold at the edges, too warm in the center. The scent of smoke, earth, and human presence lingers, unable to escape easily. There is no perfect comfort, only adaptation. And then there are the sounds, not loud, but constant, a soft cough from one corner, the quiet rustle of straw or fabric as someone shifts, breathing, steady, overlapping, sometimes interrupted by a sigh or a murmur from a dream not yet fully formed. These sounds become part of the night's rhythm. At first, they might seem distracting, but over time, they fade into something else. A kind of background presence that the mind learns to accept, even rely on. Silence, in its pure form, is rare here, and perhaps not entirely welcome. Because beyond these small, familiar sounds lies a different kind of quiet, the kind that waits outside, just beyond the walls. Out there, the darkness stretches further than the room can contain. The wind moves freely. Animals pass unseen. The world exists in a way that feels distant, yet very close at the same time, and the thin walls of a medieval home do little to separate the two. A sudden gust might press softly against the structure, making it creak in response. A distant noise might slip through, a bark, a call, something unidentifiable carried by the night air. You hear it even as you try to rest, and for a brief moment, your awareness shifts outward, beyond the crowded warmth of the room, into the open, unseen world outside. It is a subtle tension, not enough to keep you awake, but enough to remind you of where you are. Eventually, your body settles again. The shared warmth, the steady breathing, the gentle weight of blankets begin to anchor you. Sleep comes. Slowly, then all at once, and within that sleep, the closeness of the room does not disappear, it becomes part of the experience. Dreams may be shaped by it, the presence of others blending with the quiet landscapes of the mind, and when you wake again, as you often will in the medieval night, it is not to solitude, but to the same shared space, the same quiet closeness, the same awareness that rest here is never entirely your own. As you lie here now, in your own space, perhaps with distance between you and others, with walls that create separation, with silence that feels complete, it may seem difficult to imagine, but for most of history, sleep was not private. The night has deepened now. The small room you entered earlier, crowded, warm, filled with quiet breathing, has settled into a steady rhythm. Bodies lie close, the boundaries between individuals softened by darkness and necessity, but within this closeness, there is something even more unusual, something that, to the modern mind, feels almost impossible to accept. The bed itself is not yours alone. In the medieval world, sharing a bed was not an exception, it was the norm. Imagine it now, not a wide, comfortable mattress with space to stretch and turn freely, but a narrow surface, layered with straw or simple padding, just enough to lift you from the cold ground, and upon it, more than one person, sometimes two, often more, family members, of course, parents and children lying side by side, their sleep intertwined in the most literal way. But not only family, travelers, guests, even strangers might find themselves sharing the same bed, brought together not by choice, but by circumstance. Space is limited, warmth is valuable, and a bed, no matter how simple, is not easily wasted, so people share, without hesitation, without discomfort, at least, not in the way we might expect, because in this world, the idea of personal sleeping space has not yet taken root. There is no expectation of distance, no assumption that rest must happen in isolation. Instead, the bed becomes something communal, a place not just of sleep, but of presence. You lie there now, aware of another person beside you. Their warmth seeps through the layers of fabric and straw. Their breathing, steady and close, becomes something you cannot ignore, but also something you do not need to. At first, it may feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. The instinct to create space, to separate, rises quietly within you, but here, there is nowhere to move, and slowly, that instinct fades, replaced by something else, a quiet acceptance, because in the medieval night, closeness brings a certain kind of security. The world outside is vast and uncertain. Darkness stretches endlessly beyond the walls, filled with sounds and possibilities that cannot always be explained, but here, within the shared space of the bed, there is something grounding, a reminder that you are not alone, even if the person beside you is not someone you know well. Their presence becomes part of the comfort, and over time, the body adapts, the mind quiets. What once felt intrusive begins to feel normal, still. This arrangement is not without its challenges. Sleep, in a shared bed, is rarely still. A turn from one person affects another. A shift of weight travels across the narrow surface. Blankets are pulled, adjusted, reclaimed in small, unconscious movements. There is a constant negotiation. Even in rest, and yet, people manage, because they must, because this is how the night works. In some cases, the arrangement becomes even more complex. In larger homes, or along well-traveled roads, beds might be shared by multiple strangers, individuals who have never met before, brought together by the simple need for a place to sleep. Conversations may happen before rest. Brief exchanges in low voices, names perhaps shared, or perhaps not, and then silence. Trust, in this context, is not something built over time. It is assumed, or at least accepted. You close your eyes beside someone you do not know, and trust that the night will pass without harm. It is a quiet leap of faith, one that feels foreign now, but was once entirely ordinary. And then there are the subtle human details, the warmth of another body in the cold, the steady rhythm of shared breathing, the faint, unconscious movements that remind you again and again that you are part of something collective. Sleep here is not an isolated retreat into the self. It is a shared experience, messy, imperfect, human. As the night continues, you may wake briefly, as you have before, caught between the first and second sleep, and in that moment, the awareness of another person beside you is even clearer. You hear them breathe, you feel the slight rise and fall of the bed, and for a moment, in the deep quiet of night, you exist not as a solitary sleeper, but as part of a small, shared world. Then, slowly, sleep returns, and the boundaries between you fade once more, as you rest now, in your own space, perhaps with distance between you and others, with a bed that belongs only to you. It may feel difficult to fully imagine, but for centuries, this was simply how people slept, not apart, but together. And as the medieval night stretches on, filled with shared warmth and quiet presence, you begin to understand something subtle, yet deeply human, that rest was once something experienced side by side, not in solitude, but in the quiet closeness of others. The bed beneath you is not soft, not in the way you might expect, not in the way your body is used to. There are no layered mattresses here, no carefully designed support, no gentle cushioning that molds to your shape. Instead, what lies beneath you is something far simpler and far less forgiving, a base of straw, loose, uneven, dry. It shifts slightly as you move, creating a faint rustling sound in the quiet of the night. Each piece presses differently against your body, some bending under weight, others resisting, creating small points of pressure that never fully disappear. This is what most people in the medieval world slept on, not because it was comfortable, but because it was available. Imagine lying back fully now, letting your weight settle into it. At first, it feels awkward. Your body searches instinctively for softness, for balance, but finds only irregular support. One shoulder sinks slightly while the other remains raised. Your hips press against a firmer patch. Your legs adjust again and again, trying to find a position that feels natural, but the surface does not adapt to you. You must adapt to it, over time. People learned how a thin layer of cloth might be placed over the straw, coarse linen or wool, worn from use. It softens the edges just enough to make rest possible, but not enough to erase the texture beneath. Sometimes, the straw itself is packed into a rough sack, a ticking mattress. Simple in construction, filled by hand and replaced when it becomes too compressed or dirty, because that is another quiet truth of this bedding, it does not stay clean for long. The straw breaks down slowly. It gathers dust, moisture, and whatever the environment allows. It must be changed, refreshed. But not often enough to feel truly fresh. Rough, uneven, temporary, and yet, despite all this, people sleep deeply, at times, because the body does not demand perfection, it only demands enough warmth, enough stillness, enough safety. As you lie here now, imagining the texture beneath you, the subtle discomfort, the constant need to adjust. You may begin to notice something else, a quiet resilience, the human ability to rest, even when conditions are far from ideal, to find sleep, not because everything is perfect, but because the body knows how to let go. And perhaps there is something else, something almost grounding in a different way, because without layers of softness separating you from the surface below, there is a stronger awareness of your own presence, your weight, your position, your connection to the space around you. It is not always comfortable, but it is real, and as the night continues, and your body, imagined or otherwise, begins to settle into this uneven bed, the small discomforts fade slightly, not disappearing, but becoming less important. Your breathing slows, your thoughts drift, and once again, sleep begins to take hold. Not because the bed invites it, but because the night does, and as you drift deeper into that quiet rest, you carry with you the understanding that, in the medieval world, comfort was not a guarantee, it was something simpler, something earned through adaptation. Something found, even in straw and roughness, and somehow, it was enough. The night grows heavier now. Outside, the world is transformed. Trees stand as dark silhouettes against the faint starlight. The wind sweeps across open fields, rattling loose branches and whispering through gaps in the walls. And in the small medieval home you have entered, warmth is fleeting. Winter in the medieval world is not gentle. It is sharp, relentless, and it reaches every corner of a home, every inch of the sleeping body. Stone floors and thin walls do little to shield against the chill. The air carries a persistent cold that creeps upward from the ground and settles into every crevice. People had learned to adapt. They layered clothing, woolen tunics, heavy stockings, even multiple shifts of linen beneath. Blankets and furs became essential, stacked carefully atop each other on the straw bedding. Heat was precious, guarded, and often shared. Family members huddled together, not just for closeness, but for survival. A fire, when available, was tended with almost sacred attention. Its flames provided not just light, but life itself, warding off the creeping cold that seemed to seep into bones. Even so, warmth was rarely uniform. The edges of the room remained chilly, where the firelight barely reached. Some family members would sleep closer to the embers, others further away, adjusting in small shifts through the night to maintain a balance between comfort and suffocation. The cold had a way of sharpening awareness. Every gust of wind against the walls, every draft sneaking in under doors or through gaps in shutters, was immediately noticed. Sleeping lightly could mean the difference between rest and discomfort. The body, already weary from the day's labor, became a careful negotiator, instinctively adjusting to find warmth without disturbing others sharing the space. Even the straw bedding played a part in winter survival. When properly packed, it offered slight insulation from the icy floors. But it was crude and uneven, leaving small pockets where the chill penetrated. Some households supplemented straw with furs, animal hides laid across the bed to create patches of warmth. These were precious possessions, treasured as much for their heat as for their rarity, and yet, the cold did more than challenge comfort. It shaped the rhythm of life. Activities ended earlier. Meals were prepared and consumed quickly before darkness and frost forced people inside. Nights felt longer, heavier, stretching endlessly into the hours before first sleep. Even waking in the middle of the night, the second sleep, was experienced differently. Often accompanied by shivers and the pressing need to huddle closer to others, the cold also made nights intimate in ways unfamiliar today. Touch became practical. Hands were clasped over shared blankets, shoulders pressed against neighbors for warmth. These small, unspoken acts of proximity created bonds, silent understandings born of necessity. And as the body settled into rest, it did so alongside others, comforted not by soft mattresses or heated rooms, but by shared warmth and human presence. Yet winter nights were not merely physical challenges, they carried psychological weight as well. Darkness felt deeper, more absolute, when paired with the penetrating cold. Sleep could be fitful, interrupted by the discomfort of ice-cold air brushing exposed skin, or by the creaking of frost-laden structures as they contracted in the night. Even the faintest sound, a distant howl, the crackle of frost-laden branches, felt amplified, echoing in the stillness and magnifying a sense of isolation. And in these long, cold nights, humans became keen observers of survival. Blankets were carefully adjusted, fires coaxed back to life, and every movement was calculated to conserve energy and warmth. Sleep itself became an adaptive act, a skill learned and honed through necessity, rather than indulgence. Even now, imagining this small room in winter, the body instinctively tightens. You feel the chill that never fully disappears, the weight of blankets pressed close, the warmth shared with others beside you. You can almost hear the subtle rustle of straw as limbs shift, or the faint sigh of someone breathing against the cold air. Winter nights demanded attention, adaptation, and presence. They shaped how people slept, how they shared space, and how they understood the world beyond their walls. And as you imagine the medieval household huddled together against the relentless chill, you begin to understand something profound. Sleep was never just about rest. It was about endurance, about closeness, about finding small islands of warmth and calm in a world made colder by night and winter alike. And in that quiet, frozen night, you can feel the medieval world breathing with you. The night, though deep and dark, is never truly silent. In the medieval world, the moments between first and second sleep, the hours when firelight has faded and bodies are settled, are punctuated by sounds both familiar and unpredictable. Even within the walls of a home, sleep is never absolute. Imagine the room again. Straw bedding creaks under the weight of shifting bodies. Breath rises and falls in uneven rhythms. The air is heavy with warmth from clustered humans, but it carries other scents too: smoke from the dying fire, the faint tang of damp earth, the remnants of the day's cooking. And now, layered atop all of this, sound. Animals are everywhere. Cats, often kept to guard against mice, slip quietly between feet and furniture. Their soft padding is almost imperceptible, yet enough to stir a sleeper briefly. Dogs lie closer to the fire, ears twitching at every distant noise, ready to bark if danger approaches. Chickens, when kept indoors for warmth, occasionally squawk or shuffle, their wings brushing the walls of the home. Even livestock housed nearby add to the orchestra of night: the low hum of a cow, the metallic clink of tethered pigs, the creak of a stable gate moving with the wind. And then there are the sounds beyond the house. The wind, always present, whistles through cracks in the walls, rattles shutters, and bends branches so that they scrape against the roof. A door swings in a gentle gust. The earth itself seems alive, creaking and groaning in ways that might be mistaken for footsteps, even danger. Humans, too, contribute. Children stir in the night, dreaming or restless from cold. A cough, a sigh, a soft murmur breaks the quiet. Even the simple act of rolling over in a shared bed produces a rustle, a shift in the bedding that others notice. In these small, confined homes, there is no way to escape these disturbances. They are part of the rhythm of life, yet, for medieval people, these noises were not necessarily alarming. They were expected. Life had trained the senses to accept and even anticipate them. Awareness was heightened, not anxious, but acute. The ear, unused to artificial silence, picked up what mattered, the distinct difference between the usual rustle of straw and the unusual scrape of an intruder. The sound of wind versus the shuffle of an animal in search of food. Sometimes, disturbances carried weight. A sudden crash outside could awaken everyone in the home. Perhaps a loose branch fell on the roof. Perhaps an animal wandered too close. Perhaps the wind had pried something from the earth. These small events could prompt immediate reactions, a quick check of the fire, a whispered conversation, the comforting touch of another sleeper, and yet, even with interruptions, sleep returned. Not always smoothly, not always immediately, but eventually. People learned to drift again, accommodating the world around them rather than ignoring it. Sleep was adaptive, responsive, rather than rigid or insulated. The cumulative effect of these sounds was subtle but profound. Humans slept lighter in some periods and heavier in others, responding to patterns they had learned over years of living in close contact with the unpredictable night. Dreams might emerge differently when disturbed, or the mind might remain half alert, ready to react if a threat approached. And even mundane events, a mouse skittering, the faint scratching of rats, shaped nightly rituals, huddling closer together, adjusting straw, rekindling a dying ember. In this world, disturbance was inevitable. Silence was a rare luxury, not the default. People slept with an awareness that the night was alive, noisy, shifting, and sometimes startling. Yet they adapted, their bodies and minds forming rhythms attuned to the constant, gentle chaos, and perhaps most importantly, these noises created a sense of presence. They reminded sleepers that they were not isolated, that life continued all around them, even when the darkness suggested stillness. There was safety in numbers, but also a connection to the living, breathing world beyond the small room. As you lie here now, imagining yourself in that small, crowded space, you may notice the faint noises of your own surroundings. A distant car, the rustle of leaves, the hum of modern life seeping in. In a strange way, you are closer to the medieval experience than you think, alert to the subtle disturbances, yet comforted by the fact that all is still, all is familiar, in that delicate balance, between alertness and rest, between presence and sleep, the medieval night lived. And you can feel it now, a world where sound was never an interruption, but an intrinsic part of life. And of rest. The night deepens further. Outside, the world is an expanse of shadow, stretching beyond the reach of firelight, candlelight, or even the faint glow of stars. Inside, the small medieval home feels snug, but even here, darkness is a presence, tangible and almost alive. For those living in this time, the night was not always a peaceful retreat. Darkness carried weight. It held mysteries. It concealed shapes, sounds, and movements that could not easily be explained. And in the absence of artificial light, the imagination was free to wander, sometimes gently, sometimes with unease. Imagine lying in your shared bed, bundled under layers of blankets and rough straw. Your body is warm. Yet the edges of the room remain cold, shadowed. The fire has burned low, the candle has guttered out. Around you, the world is black. Shapes become indistinct. The mind begins to notice details it would ignore in daylight, the flicker of a shadow cast by a protruding beam, the shifting of curtains in a draught, the faint scuttle of a rat along the floor. These are simple things, but in the medieval mind, simple things often became more. A shadow stretching across the wall could be interpreted as a lurking figure. A sound in the rafters might be an animal, or a spirit. With night stretching hours beyond modern expectation, the imagination had room to explore, to invent, to warn. Fear of the dark was not mere superstition, it was practical. Darkness concealed danger. Wild animals roamed fields and forests. Roads and paths disappeared into black voids where a misstep could be fatal. The unknown carried risk, and the human mind, tuned by centuries of survival, responded. Alertness during the night, whether conscious or subconscious, was a defense mechanism. Even indoors, fear could linger. Those living in small, shared homes might wake during the night and listen carefully for sounds that felt out of place. A crack in the timber, the groan of the house settling, the howl of wind outside, all could trigger a subtle tension, a heightened awareness of vulnerability. Yet, rather than being paralyzing, this fear shaped behavior. People moved cautiously, whispered softly, and maintained proximity to others for reassurance. The darkness itself became almost a character in daily life. It was not merely the absence of light, it was a companion, an entity that demanded respect. Rooms were organized with awareness of its presence. Fire and candlelight were carefully managed. Even the timing of sleep was influenced by how well people could negotiate the shadows. For some, this fear-inspired rituals, prayers whispered before sleep, protective herbs placed in bedding, charms hung near doors. Others relied on practical measures, doors bolted, animals kept nearby, embers tended, and small movements planned to minimize risk. These actions created a delicate balance, allowing sleep to arrive without surrendering entirely to the uncertainty outside. The night, therefore, was layered. It offered rest, but it demanded vigilance. It held mystery, but also taught resilience. To live with darkness was to understand it, to coexist with its uncertainties, and to find calm within the tension it produced. And yet, the fear of the dark was not always oppressive. In its own way, it shaped the experience of night into something alive. Shadows taught observation. Sounds demanded attentiveness. The unknown cultivated imagination and awareness. People slept, yes, but they did so in a world where darkness carried meaning, depth, and presence. As you lie here now, perhaps with your modern comforts and walls that block most threats, you may notice how rare true darkness is today. You may realize how little room the imagination has to wander when every corner is lit and every sound is masked by artificial noise. The medieval night was different. It was deeper. It was more demanding. And it was always alive, and in that alive darkness, fear was not something to conquer. It was something to live with, quietly, carefully, intimately, as part of the rhythm of sleep itself. The night was vast, yes. It was unknown, yes. But it was also real. And in living with it, people found a strange kind of peace. As the night stretches on, darkness no longer feels empty. In the medieval mind, the shadows are alive. Not just with ordinary animals or the wind, but with spirits, unseen presences that slip between the folds of night. They are whispered about in hushed tones, passed from parent to child, described in tales shared near the dying fire. And when the candle burns low, when the walls seem to close in, these spirits feel closer than ever. Imagine lying awake during the quiet hours between first and second sleep. The room is dim, the last embers of the fire glow faintly, and the air carries a subtle chill. Every shadow seems to move slightly, every creak of the floor or shift of the straw bedding is magnified in the mind. This is the world where night spirits are believed to roam. There are many of them. Some are mischievous, seeking to play tricks on humans who are careless. A rustle of straw may be blamed on a sprite, moving silently to disrupt sleep. A sudden chill, a small cough in the dark, could be attributed to a wandering spirit passing unseen. Others are considered malevolent, drawn to those who are vulnerable, children sleeping alone, travelers resting on the road, the sick or weary. Their presence is both feared and respected. These beliefs shape daily life in subtle but pervasive ways. Bedchambers were prepared with care, herbs tucked beneath pillows, charms hung near doors, and small rituals performed before lying down. A whispered prayer might be offered, not out of strict religion alone, but as a shield against unseen threats that the mind cannot fully explain. Families might keep their children close, not simply for warmth, but as protection against spirits that prefer isolation. By labor and routine, observed these customs. They knew that caution mattered. In a world without bright artificial light, the night was long, uncertain, and alive. Superstitions provided structure in the unknown, rules that helped the human mind make sense of the intangible. Interestingly, the fear of spirits often blended with practical concerns. A creaking floorboard could indicate a rat. A draft could signify a loose shutter. But interpreting these occurrences through the lens of superstition gave meaning to what might otherwise be unsettling, allowing individuals to feel some sense of control in an unpredictable night. Stories of night spirits also had a communal function. Families and neighbors shared warnings and tales: who slept where, what had been seen or heard, and what precautions to take. The narratives became part of the rhythm of life, passed down through generations, embedding vigilance into daily practice and sleep habits. And yet, there was also a strange comfort in these beliefs. By acknowledging the presence of spirits, people felt they were prepared. By taking small protective actions, they could rest, knowing they had done what was possible to guard themselves. Fear, in this context, was not paralyzing, it was manageable, ritualized. The night became a delicate balance between imagination and reality. The mind wandered freely in the half-light of awareness, exploring shadows, interpreting movements, and practicing quiet vigilance. Sleep arrived not in ignorance, but in careful negotiation with the unseen. As you imagine these medieval nights, consider how differently humans experience darkness. Where we see empty blackness, they saw a living, shifting world. Where we hear only minor disturbances, they heard the steps and whispers of spirits. And through this, the night was never truly silent, never truly safe, but always meaningful. So, as you settle deeper into rest, take a moment to imagine these small rituals, these whispered prayers, and the shared presence of unseen spirits that shaped every medieval night. In this world, fear and wonder coexisted, guiding the rhythm of sleep. And within that balance, humans learn to rest, even when the shadows themselves seem to watch. As the night deepens, the shadows in a medieval home take on a new dimension, not just mystery, but sacredness. For many, the hours between first and second sleep were not empty or idle. They were a space for reflection, devotion, and ritual. The night became a bridge between the mortal world and the divine, a time when the thin veil between the earthly and spiritual realms felt closest. Imagine a small room, the last candle flickering on a rough wooden table. The fire has burned low, leaving only the warmth of embers against the stone floor. A family is settled on their straw bedding, bodies huddled close for warmth, yet there is still movement, quiet, deliberate, careful. Hands are folded. Eyes are closed. Soft murmurs of prayer ripple through the air, barely louder than a whisper, but resonating with weight and intention. Night prayers were simple yet deeply ingrained. The recitation of psalms, the repetition of familiar prayers, or the utterance of short invocations to saints were common practices. These were not performed out of fear alone, they were protective, yes, but also comforting. They transformed the unknown darkness into a sacred space, one where human presence and divine oversight coexisted. Children often joined these rituals, either through observation or direct participation. Even in the smallest homes, they learned the rhythms of devotion, the cadence of prayer. The subtle way a whispered word could act as a shield against the uncertainty of night. These practices were as much about instruction as protection, embedding a sense of security, routine, and connection to something larger than the immediate world. The rituals were not limited to spoken words. Gestures accompanied prayers, crossing oneself, touching objects of faith, placing small tokens beside the bed. Herbs or protective charms, blessed and placed carefully, were sometimes combined with these prayers, blending the spiritual with the practical. The act of preparing for night in this way was a negotiation with the darkness itself, acknowledgement, respect, and a subtle assertion of control. Beyond individual homes, larger communal practices shaped medieval nights. Bell tolls from local churches signaled hours for prayer, marking time without clocks. Even the simplest rural villages had a rhythm of devotion tied to natural cycles and the patterns of darkness. Sleep and prayer were intertwined. The spiritual act became both preparation for and companion to rest. These practices also offered a bridge between first and second sleep. As people awoke briefly in the middle of the night, many would rise, not necessarily to labor, but to pray. The stillness of night provided a quiet sanctuary, a moment of solitude within the communal space. A short prayer, a whispered thanks, or a plea for protection could punctuate the darkness, offering reassurance before returning to the second sleep. Faith, in this context, did more than comfort. It shaped the very rhythm of rest. The awareness of something larger, of divine oversight, allowed the mind to release anxiety, even in a world that was physically and psychologically harsh. Sleep became intertwined with spirituality, transforming what might otherwise be restless hours into periods of reflection, safety, and connection. Even the simplest household carried this sense of devotion. A single candle might burn through a prayer, a family member's whispered voice creating a sacred rhythm that echoed softly through the room. Each word, each gesture, grounded the night in something tangible, bridging the uncertainty of darkness with familiar faith. As you lie here, imagining this scene, there is a subtle understanding that emerges. The medieval night was never just a passage of time. It was a landscape of ritual, protection, and presence. Darkness was not merely something to endure, it was a space for reflection, a canvas for devotion, a partner in rest. And so, in the gentle hush of the night, as embers flicker and shadows deepen, you can feel the quiet intimacy of these rituals. The prayers whispered in the middle of the night were small acts of human resilience, weaving together hope, reverence, and the enduring rhythm of sleep. In this way, the night was alive, not only with shadows and fear, but with faith. And as sleep returned, carrying the body into the second rest, the soul had already traveled through a space shaped by devotion, guided by the steady, calming presence of belief itself. In the medieval night, time was something you felt, not something you measured. There were no alarm clocks to demand your attention. No glowing numbers to remind you how many hours remained until morning. No artificial schedules imposing themselves on the natural rhythms of the body. Instead, life followed a quieter, slower cadence, one shaped entirely by the sun, the moon, and the cycles of daily labor. Imagine a small village as the sun dips below the horizon. Doors are closed, fires stoked, and the last conversations fade into gentle murmurs. There is no pressing sense of urgency, only a gradual understanding. It is time to rest. Bodies, already exhausted from the toil of the day, respond naturally. Eyes grow heavy. Limbs relax. Thoughts slow, not because the clock tells them to, but because the rhythm of life insists. Sleep did not begin at an exact hour. It began when the day had fully released its hold and darkness dominated the world. People would lie down, sometimes in shared beds, sometimes alone, and the first sleep would come when the body was ready. For some, it was immediately. For others, there might be a stretch of quiet wakefulness, listening to the sounds of the night, adjusting straw bedding, or offering whispered prayers. And yet, the night was long. Hours stretched beyond what modern minds consider normal. Those who followed this rhythm often experienced segmented sleep, first sleep, a period of wakefulness, and then second sleep. The timing of these segments was not dictated by a clock, but by the internal body, by the temperature of the room, by the fading of the fire, and by the rhythms of light outside. Without artificial light, humans became attuned to subtle environmental cues. The rise and fall of ambient light, the cooling of the air, the quiet movements of animals, all informed when it was time to sleep and when it was natural to wake. The body developed its own internal schedule, one that often aligned closely with nature. Even daytime activity influenced night schedules. Those who labored from dawn to dusk often fell into first sleep almost immediately, while lighter days might lead to a more extended period of quiet wakefulness in the middle of the night. Meals, work, and domestic chores all shaped the timing of rest. There was no arbitrary clock to dictate sleep, only the natural push and pull of exhaustion and alertness. Interestingly, this system created a unique kind of freedom. People were not bound to exact hours, they followed their own rhythms, learning to trust their bodies and the natural cycles of night. Waking in the middle of the night was not a failure or disruption, it was a normal, expected part of life. Activities during these hours, prayers, reflection, tending the fire, were gently woven into the schedule of rest. The absence of strict timing also meant that sleep was flexible. One night, a family might rest deeply through the first sleep, waking only briefly before the second. Another night, a storm might disturb the straw bedding, or the cold might seep into bones, lengthening the period of wakefulness. Sleep adapted to circumstances rather than following an external demand. Even in larger households or castles, where there was more structure and hierarchy, sleep schedules were still guided by natural cues. Servants, guards, and travelers learned to rise and rest according to light. Labor and necessity, not mechanical precision. Time was observed through patterns of behavior, the tolling of church bells, the arrival of morning light, the shift changes of night watchmen. In this rhythm, humans became intimate observers of the night. They learned to detect small changes in temperature, light, and sound, knowing that these subtle shifts signaled the passage of hours. Sleep was embedded in awareness, not in numbers. Each night was a dialogue between the body, the environment, and the darkness itself. As you lie here, free from the constraints of clocks and schedules, you can almost feel this natural rhythm reasserting itself. The weight of your body against the mattress, the gentle slowing of breath, the ebb of thoughts. It mirrors the medieval experience. Sleep is not imposed. It is discovered. In this way, the medieval night was a space of autonomy. Time was measured by experience, not instruments. Sleep followed life, not the other way around. And in that freedom, there was a calm that modern minds rarely know, a quiet harmony with the unseen rhythms of night and nature. The absence of clocks allowed sleep to be gentle, fluid, and responsive. And in that fluidity, the night became something alive, something to navigate, and something to surrender to, naturally, peacefully, and without resistance. By now, the medieval night has stretched long and deep, yet the rhythm of life continues to shape it, even in darkness. Sleep, as we have seen, is not simply a state of rest. It is a response to light, to temperature, to fear, to ritual. And perhaps most profoundly, to the labor of the day. In the medieval world, work was relentless, physical, and demanding. From the first light of dawn, when the sun barely touched the horizon, until its setting, bodies moved in constant motion. Fields had to be plowed, animals tended, fires maintained, water carried, food prepared, and homes repaired. Each task required not only effort, but vigilance, coordination, and endurance. By the time night arrived, fatigue was absolute, and the body's need for rest became undeniable. Imagine a peasant returning to a small, dimly lit home after a long day in the fields. Clothes damp with sweat or rain, hands calloused and sore, back aching from bending over soil. The physical exhaustion seeps into every fiber of the body. There is no artificial comfort to soften it. Straw bedding awaits, rough and uneven, yet it offers relief simply by letting the weight of the body be supported. The moment of lying down becomes a surrender to rest, to warmth, and to the night itself. Work dictated not just when sleep came, but also how it came. After a day of heavy labor, first sleep often arrives quickly, deeply. The mind, unburdened by idle thoughts, drifts effortlessly into unconsciousness. Yet this sleep is layered, responsive. If the day's work was lighter, or if the mind remained preoccupied with worry, hunger, or anticipation of tomorrow's tasks, waking during the night is more likely. First sleep gives way to quiet awareness, followed eventually by second sleep, a cycle finely tuned
Even
to
the
the demands
seasons
of
influence
labor. This pattern. In summer, long days of planting, harvesting, or tending livestock could leave bodies nearly spent, demanding early and prolonged sleep. In winter, work might be more fragmented, chopping firewood, tending indoor animals, repairing homes, leading to a more interrupted rest. Humans adapted naturally, without clocks, to balance activity and recuperation. Work also influenced where sleep occurred. Laborers might sleep in shared beds with family members, or in communal spaces if the home was too small. travelers and itinerant workers often rested wherever they could find a space, in inns, barns, or even in open fields with only blankets or straw for comfort. The physical demands of the day dictated the level of tolerance for discomfort, how much cold, how much uneven bedding, how much noise one could endure before the body insisted on rest. Interestingly, labor shaped more than the physical need for sleep. It influenced the psychology of rest. After a day of honest work, people often found sleep easier to surrender to, even amidst darkness, cold, or fear. The mind, satisfied with effort and progress, was calmer. Dreams were often vivid, shaped by the day's labor, plowed fields, animals tended, the endless cycles of work repeated in unconscious thought. Even wakefulness between first and second sleep could be used constructively, tending embers, checking animals, quiet contemplation, or whispered prayers, all activities that aligned with the day's rhythm. For the upper classes, work shaped sleep differently but no less profoundly. Guards, servants, and cooks adhered to schedules dictated by necessity. Nobles might rest longer, but the rhythm of household activity still imposed its own boundaries. In castles, the movement of staff, the watch of guards, and the rituals of evening meals created a nocturnal backdrop that influenced sleep patterns, even for those with comfort and space. And so, sleep in the medieval world cannot be understood apart from work. The day's exertion dictated the night's depth and pattern. It created the natural first and second sleep cycle. It shaped the adaptability of the body to discomfort, to cold, to darkness, and to shared spaces. Without labor, the rhythm of the night would be different, less absolute, less responsive, less alive. As you lie here now, imagine the weight of a day fully spent, the satisfaction, the fatigue, the body urging itself into stillness. You can feel how naturally, effortlessly, the body drifts towards sleep when the demands of the day are met. The medieval night was not just a period of rest, it was the reward for endurance. And in this rhythm, one begins to sense the deep connection between life and rest. The work of the day shapes the dreams of the night, the exhaustion of labor shapes the comfort of sleep, and the effort of living ensures the body and mind are ready to embrace darkness in all its mystery. The night has settled fully now. The body is quiet, the fire is reduced to faint embers, and the shadows in the small medieval home have grown long and still. But even in this profound silence, the mind does not always rest. It wanders, drifting into the strange, shifting world of dreams. In the medieval imagination, dreams were not random or meaningless. They were messages, omens, and mirrors of the soul. To dream was to enter a parallel landscape, one where the ordinary rules of life were suspended, yet where hidden truths were whispered. A dream could warn, guide, or teach, its significance often interpreted by learned clergy, elders, or the dreamer themselves. Imagine drifting from first sleep into a dream. You are aware of your body lying on rough straw bedding, yet your mind travels elsewhere. Perhaps you are walking through a dense forest at night, the moonlight streaming through the trees. Perhaps you see a familiar face, speaking words you barely understand. Perhaps a strange figure approaches, silent, elusive, its meaning unclear. The boundaries between reality and imagination are fluid, and every detail is imbued with potential significance. Dreams were closely tied to daily life. A peasant might dream of crops, of animals, of labor not yet completed, and interpret these visions as indicators of fortune or misfortune. A noble might dream of feasts, battles, or lost treasure, each symbol carrying weight in the waking world. Illness, hunger, or emotional stress could manifest in dreams as dark omens or mysterious encounters. Certain dreams were considered prophetic. A vision of fire could suggest danger at home. A sudden fall might indicate misfortune or a warning to change behavior. Animals appearing in dreams often had layered meanings. Wolves could signal threat, birds could represent freedom or messages from the divine. Symbols were interpreted carefully, through religious or cultural lenses, making dreams a quiet but powerful part of humor. The night itself influenced dreaming. Waking during the first and second sleep often heightened awareness of dreams. In those hours of wakefulness, people might reflect on visions, recount fragments to family members, or even write them down, though literacy was rare in most homes. This interlude created a bridge between the conscious and subconscious, allowing interpretation to mingle with action, ritual, or prayer. Fear also colored dreams. Darkness, cold, and the sounds of night, animals, wind, distant footsteps, could shape visions in subtle ways. Spirits whispered, shadows shifted, and dreams carried fragments of anxiety alongside insight. Yet even fear was meaningful. To interpret it correctly was to gain understanding. To prepare for waking life, and to honor the mysterious rhythm of night, not all dreams were heavy or ominous. Some brought comfort. Children often dreamt of protection, warmth, and guidance from ancestors or saints. Adults might experience visions that reinforced family ties, work successes, or moral lessons. Dreams could soothe, inspire, or guide decisions. They were not escapism, they were integrated into life, as much a part of night as the body's sleep cycles or the rituals performed before rest. Dreams were communal, too. Shared bedrooms allowed for whispered discussion of visions, small interpretations exchanged softly before the second sleep resumed. Even strangers, traveling together, might compare odd nocturnal experiences, finding connection in the mysterious nocturnal landscape. In this way, the night became a shared world of conscious and unconscious experience, bridging imagination, reality, and belief. And so, in the medieval night, dreams were a sacred, practical, and deeply human phenomenon. They were mirrors of the day's labor, reflections of inner fears, messengers from the divine, and guides through uncertainty. To dream was not passive, it was an active participation in the night, a quiet journey between reality and mystery. As you lie here now, imagining yourself drifting through sleep, perhaps you feel the echoes of your own dream world stirring. Notice the way the mind shapes visions from fragments of your day, how fears and hopes merge into strange, vivid landscapes. In this, you are closer than ever to the medieval experience, where sleep was a passage not just of the body, but of the soul, and in that delicate, mysterious space, the night becomes alive with stories, messages, and possibilities, each dream a step into the unseen, guiding the sleeper gently through darkness towards second sleep and beyond. As the night deepens and sleep settles over the small medieval home, there is a quiet fragility woven into its rhythm. Sleep, for all its restorative power, is never guaranteed. Illness and discomfort hover close, shaping the night in subtle but profound ways. Imagine a child stirring in their shared straw bed, cheeks flushed with fever. A mother leans over, damp cloth in hand, whispering soft reassurances as the child shivers. The rest of the household lies nearby, aware of the presence of sickness, yet bound by the constraints of shared space and limited resources. Here, every breath, every movement, becomes a measure of care. Nighttime illness was a relentless companion in medieval life. Without modern medicine, small ailments, aches, fevers, or colds could become severe. The night magnified discomfort. Straw bedding offered little cushioning, the cold seeped into bones, and limited firewood meant that warmth was precious and uneven. Even minor disturbances, restless movements, coughing, or the occasional groan echoed through the room, breaking the fragile rhythm of sleep. The body itself demanded attention. Fever caused sweat to soak linen and blankets, chills drew shivers through the spine, and pain tugged at muscles already exhausted by the day's labor. Sleep became fragmented. The mind remained partially alert, monitoring each change, each sigh, each subtle shift in temperature. The night was long, and relief was uncertain. In these moments, caregiving became an intimate part of the nightly rhythm. Family members rose quietly from their own sleep, tending to the sick. They adjusted straw and blankets, offered sips of water, or applied simple herbal remedies. Sometimes, the presence of another human was the only comfort available, hands resting gently, murmured words providing reassurance, a sense of safety amidst vulnerability. Even for those not visibly ill, discomfort shaped sleep. Cold drafts crept into the edges of small homes, rustling straw and chilling exposed skin. Hunger, a constant companion for many, gnawed at the stomach and invaded dreams. Aching joints, muscle fatigue from the day's labor, and the ever-present tension of shared beds all contributed to a body that never rested fully. Sleep was a negotiation, a careful balance between the body's needs and the limitations of the environment, yet there was resilience. Humans adapted. They learned to find positions that minimized pain, to huddle for warmth, to adjust blankets and straw with minimal movement. The rhythm of first sleep, brief wakefulness, and second sleep allowed moments of care and adjustment without losing the restorative power of rest. Even in discomfort, the night offered opportunities for calm and healing. However subtle, nighttime illness also shaped the imagination. Dreams could become vivid, surreal, or alarming when the body was fevered or weakened. Shadows might loom larger, sounds might feel sharper, and spirits, real or imagined, seemed nearer. In a world where explanations for illness often blended observation and belief, dreams could be interpreted as omens, guidance, or warnings, linking the physical state of the body to the mysteries of the night. And yet, amidst this vulnerability, there was intimacy. Sickness brought people closer. Shared beds meant warmth was doubled, whispers of reassurance filled the space, and simple acts, tilting a cup, adjusting a blanket, became gestures of profound care. The night, though harsh, carried a quiet humanity within its darkness. As you imagine yourself in this room, sensing the discomfort of cold, fever, or pain, notice how awareness transforms. You are attuned to the body, to others, to the subtle shifts in temperature, sound, and movement. Sleep becomes something precious, fragile, and deeply interconnected with the world around you. In the medieval night, illness was never ignored. It shaped the flow of rest, the actions of caregivers, and even the rhythm of dreams. And within this delicate balance of discomfort and care, humans learn to sleep, adapt, and endure. As the hours move slowly toward morning, the quiet labor of vigilance, of tending, and of adaptation continues. The night, with all its challenges, becomes a living landscape, a space where the body, the mind, and human connection coexist, fragile yet persistent, guiding the sleeper gently through darkness. The night outside the small medieval home is vast and unpredictable. But imagine stepping beyond its walls, leaving the relative warmth and safety behind. The world becomes larger, darker, and far less certain. For travelers on the road, sleep is a fragile, fleeting thing, shaped by exposure, danger, and necessity. In the absence of inns or secure lodgings, a night's rest might occur under the stars, with nothing but a cloak or a thin blanket for protection. The ground is uneven, sometimes damp, often cold. Straw or rushes might be gathered in a small bundle to create a rudimentary bed, but the body is never fully insulated. Every gust of wind, every shift in weather, and every rustle in the underbrush is felt acutely. Sleep comes in short bursts, shallow and vigilant, as the mind remains alert to threats. Even within small towns or villages, travelers often had limited options. Inns were scarce, and when available, they were crowded. Beds were shared, floors were used when straw was unavailable, and the noise of strangers, snoring, coughing, moving, invaded rest. Comfort was secondary to survival. The body adjusted, curling tightly, huddling, layering clothing, and relying on any warmth that could be gathered from companions. The dangers of the night were constant. Wolves, wild dogs, or bandits might roam the roads. A fire could attract attention, or failing to maintain one could invite frost or illness. Travelers had to remain strategic, choosing resting spots that balanced concealment, warmth, and safety. Sleep was tactical, never absolute, always responsive. Even in such conditions, humans adapted. First sleep might arrive quickly after a long day of travel, but the middle of the night waking, what medieval people called the second sleep, was fraught with awareness. Eyes open to shadows, ears tuned to the slightest sound. The mind processed risk, often rehearsing scenarios, calculating distance, and deciding whether to rise, move, or stay still. Rest and vigilance existed side by side. Travelers also relied on rituals and practical measures. Charms or prayers might be carried for protection. Fires were kept low but alive, embers attended to quietly. Clothing was layered, boots removed or adjusted to keep feet from frostbite. And straw or blankets arranged to minimize exposure. The night became a delicate negotiation between fatigue and survival. Even dreams were shaped by this uncertainty. A traveler dreaming in a roadside field might see visions of pursuit, strange animals, or guidance, reflections of fear, hope, and the mind's effort to process danger while the body tried to rest. Waking could bring both relief and anxiety. The night was still there, vast and full of unknowns, waiting beyond the small circle of warmth and protection. Yet despite the hardships, sleep on the road was a testament to human resilience. Bodies, minds, and spirits learned to rest even in precarious circumstances. Travelers became attuned to rhythms of nature, temperature shifts, sounds of animals, phases of the moon, allowing sleep to arrive despite uncertainty. Even a short period of rest could restore enough energy to continue the journey at dawn. The road at night was both harsh and alive. Every sound, every shadow, every chill carried meaning. Sleep became a negotiation between the needs of the body and the vigilance required for survival. Humans rested, not because comfort allowed it, but because necessity demanded it, and as you imagine yourself in that field, on the edge of the dark forest, or on a narrow country road, wrapped in coarse blankets or cloaks, the medieval night surrounds you fully. You can feel the vulnerability of exposed skin, the alertness of the mind, the subtle movements of the body adjusting for warmth. You can hear the whisper of wind through trees, the distant howl of a wolf, the faint rustle of animals moving unseen. This is sleep in its rawest form, fragile, adaptive, and deeply human. The road teaches endurance, awareness, and a unique intimacy with the night itself, and in that darkness, as the traveler drifts between first and second sleep, the road becomes more than a passage of land. It becomes a living, breathing part of the night, shaping rest, dreams, and the very experience of human vulnerability under the stars. The night in a medieval village is one thing. It is small, cramped, intimate, shaped by straw bedding, shared warmth, and the constant presence of others. But the night in a castle is something else entirely. Vast, imposing, and layered with both luxury and vigilance, a castle creates a nocturnal world that is profoundly different from the simple rhythms of village life. Imagine stepping from a modest timber home into a massive stone fortress. The walls are thick, the ceilings high, and the chambers echo faintly with every sound. Tapestries hang on cold stone, offering some warmth and muffling, but the sheer scale of the rooms means that sound and temperature behave differently. A single candle cannot illuminate the space fully. Shadows cling to corners, stairwells, and corridors. The night is grand, but it is also distant, impersonal in its vastness. In villages, families huddle together for warmth, comfort, and security. Beds are shared, bodies pressed close, the room alive with human presence. In a castle, however, spaces are often larger, more segmented. Nobles may sleep in private chambers, separated from the noise of servants and guards. There is room to stretch, but the cold of stone can seep through even the thickest mattresses and blankets. Wealth provides comfort, but it cannot erase the chill or the awareness of night. Even within comfort, there is vigilance. Guards patrol corridors, their footsteps muffled but unmistakable. The sound of distant doors closing or creaking stairs adds a sense of life beyond the chamber. Nobles, though insulated from the hardships of village life, are aware that danger can still approach, from invaders, from fire, or from internal threats. Sleep is indulgent, yes, but not complete surrender. It exists alongside alertness. In the village, the night is communal, intimate, and tactile. In the castle, the night is layered, structured, and hierarchical. Servants and retainers may sleep in large communal halls, on rush-strewn floors, or on basic mattresses near the kitchens and stables. Their sleep mirrors village conditions, shared, cramped, and responsive to noise and labor. Yet they exist within a larger framework, a building designed to assert power and protection, which changes the way the night is experienced. Temperature differences are also stark. Village homes are small, so the heat of bodies and embers circulates quickly. Castle chambers, even with hearths, can be cold and drafty. Fires are managed carefully. Heat is a luxury and often concentrated in the main halls or the nobles' private rooms. The edges of the castle remain unheated and chilling, reminding everyone of the structure's scale and the limits of human comfort. Sleep in a castle is also shaped by social roles. Nobles may sleep later, rising after servants and guards, their schedules informed by ritual, meals, and courtly obligations. Servant sleep is reactive, punctuated by labor, the movement of masters, and the demands of the household. Even dreams may reflect these differences. Nobles may dream of strategy, alliances, or wealth, while servants' dreams might echo labor, exhaustion, or vigilance, and yet, despite these contrasts, some human truths remain. In both villages and castles, the medieval night is alive with presence. Shadows, sounds, cold, and warmth shape sleep. Bodies adapt. Minds remain alert. First sleep and second sleep persist. Segmented and responsive, regardless of wealth or status. Fear, comfort, intimacy, and ritual all interweave into the nocturnal experience. As you lie here now, imagining these contrasting worlds, notice the subtle shifts. In the village, you feel closeness, warmth, and constant human presence. In the castle, you sense grandeur, distance, and layered vigilance. Both nights are rich, immersive, and alive, but each is shaped by circumstance, architecture, and human need. The medieval night is not uniform. It bends, stretches, and shifts according to walls, weather, status, and labor. Yet whether in straw or feather-stuffed mattress, whether in a tiny home or vast stone hall, the human need for rest, adaptation, and security remains constant, and in recognizing these differences, you begin to understand the full spectrum of medieval nights, intimate and communal, vast and hierarchical, comforting and challenging, yet always alive, always shaping sleep, dreams, and the fragile balance between body and darkness. The night reaches its most opulent form now, a world away from the cramped, straw-filled chambers of peasants or the drafty spaces of castle servants. In the private rooms of the wealthy, sleep is elevated into a ritual of luxury, comfort, and subtle power. Here, the night is not just endured, it is curated. Imagine stepping into a noble chamber. The walls are draped with thick tapestries that hold heat and soften the darkness. A roaring fire fills the room with warmth and gentle light, flickering across carved wooden furniture and polished floors. The air carries the faint scent of beeswax candles, herbs, and the lingering aroma of a carefully prepared meal. Outside, the cold, the wind, and the night's unpredictability are kept at bay. Inside, all is designed to support rest. The bed itself is a marvel, a centerpiece of status and comfort. Layers of soft mattresses rise from the frame, stacked like the floors of a small house. Stuffed with down feathers, wool, or straw depending on season and wealth, each layer cradles the body, adjusting gently to its shape. Linen sheets are fine, sometimes embroidered, and blankets heavy with warmth. Pillows are not singular but multiplied, offering support for head, neck, and even body sides. The wealthy often slept not just with family, but with attendants nearby and nurses, pages, or companions, ready to respond to needs, adjust fires, or prepare night drinks of spiced wine or warm milk. Sleep in these chambers is both indulgent and structured. While comfort is maximized, the rhythms of the day, the call of rituals, and the demands of status still impose themselves subtly on the night. Even the wealthy were not entirely free from the medieval night's challenges. Cold could still creep in through stone walls, drafts could sneak around poorly sealed windows, and shadows could play tricks in candlelight. Waking between first and second sleep remained common. Yet, here, these moments are cushioned with comfort. A hand reaches for a pillow, a servant rekindles the fire, and warmth and light are restored almost instantly. The interruptions of the night are softened, almost luxurious in their management, the bed itself is symbolic, a statement of power as well as comfort. Large enough to allow freedom of movement, it also demonstrates wealth and social hierarchy, the number of attendants, the quality of the materials, and the decorations all convey status. Rest becomes a performative act as much as a physical need. Sleep in such a bed is not just restoration, it is an assertion of privilege, a daily luxury that many never experience. In dreams, the wealthy inhabit a different world too. Their subconscious journeys reflect security, abundance, and influence. They may dream of hunting in distant forests, feasts in grand halls, or alliances with powerful neighbors. Even the night itself seems gentler, its shadows less threatening, its cold less invasive. Sleep becomes immersive, expansive, and deeply restorative, yet, even with all this comfort, there remains an echo of the universal human night. Waking moments, the subtle fears of darkness, the soft noises of a living household, all persist. Comfort does not erase the essential rhythms of sleep, nor the mysterious pull of the night. First and second sleep, dreams, and even quiet vigilance remain, though cushioned in luxury. And here lies the quiet fascination: the medieval night, no matter how rich or poor, small or vast, is alive. For the wealthy, it is a world of control and indulgence, yet it still demands adaptation. The night still tests the body, shapes the mind, and frames the rhythm of life. It reminds us that sleep, even at its most lavish, is not merely comfort, it is an experience, a negotiation with darkness, a passage through time and uncertainty. As the wealthy sink into their layers of down and wool, the fire crackling softly, they are both removed from and connected to the rest of the world. Beyond the walls, peasants huddle over straw, travelers shiver on roads, guards patrol in shadowed corridors. Each experiences the night differently, yet all share the same human need: rest, renewal, and a brief surrender to the darkness. And as the camera of imagination pans outward, across villages, castles, and noble chambers, one thought lingers: the medieval night was not uniform, not predictable, not passive. It was alive, shaping bodies, minds, dreams, fears, and comforts in a delicate balance that stretched from the humblest straw bed to the grandest feather-stuffed mattress. And perhaps, as you lie in your own bed tonight, you can feel it too: the subtle pull of first sleep, the gentle rise into second sleep, the quiet rhythm that connects all humans across centuries. The night was different then. Yes. But in its difference, it reminds us that sleep is more than rest. It is a living, breathing, shared journey, fragile, mysterious, and profoundly human, and somewhere in the darkness, if you listen carefully, you might still hear it calling. The night is silent. But it is never empty. Even in the quietest medieval village or the most grandiose castle, the darkness carried uncertainty. It stretched beyond the reach of firelight and candles, swallowing streets, fields, and corridors in a deep, black stillness. And in that stillness, someone had to watch. Someone had to be alert, awake, and vigilant. The night watchmen, figures both unseen and indispensable, were the guardians of rest, the quiet arbiters of safety when the rest of the world slept. Imagine a small village under a moonless sky. Streets are narrow, homes are clustered tightly together, and the occasional flicker of candlelight illuminates shuttered windows. Somewhere, a figure walks slowly along the road. A staff in hand, a bell at the hip, and footsteps muffled by straw and dirt, they move deliberately, scanning the shadows. Their eyes are trained to detect movement, the shuffle of animals, the glint of metal, or the distant sound of strangers. Their presence is a silent assurance to villagers tucked in their beds, a reassurance that the darkness is monitored, even when unseen. Night watchmen were not simply observers, they were active participants in the rhythm of the night. Their duties ranged from patrolling streets and fields, checking gates and locks, to rousing villagers if danger approached. They signaled time with the toll of a bell, a shout, or the clang of a gong, marking hours and reminding everyone that the night was alive, measured, and protected. In castles, guards moved in pairs or groups, walking corridors, checking doors, and ensuring that no intruder breached walls or gates. Their presence was both deterrent and comfort. Yet vigilance was not easy. The night is deceptive. Shadows play tricks, wind bends trees into ghostly shapes, and animals, wolves, foxes, or stray dogs, can create fear where none is warranted. A watchman had to distinguish between threat and illusion, remaining alert through long, cold hours while their own body craved sleep. Fatigue was constant, and mistakes could be costly, not just for themselves, but for everyone they guarded. Still, humans adapted. Watchmen developed acute senses, listening for the subtle scrape of a shoe against cobblestone, observing the irregular flicker of candlelight, feeling the vibrations of distant hooves. They learned the rhythms of the night, when animals stirred, when wind gusts were strongest, when silence held, and when danger approached. Their bodies became instruments tuned to the nuances of darkness. Even in moments of calm, the watchman's presence shaped sleep for everyone else. Villagers rested easier knowing someone was alert. Castle inhabitants slept without fear of theft or attack. The very act of vigilance allowed the night to become a space of relative peace, even when danger was never entirely absent. The psychology of night watch was complex. There was pride in protection, yes, but also a quiet tension, the constant awareness that the night could change in an instant. Dreams of watchmen might carry vigilance into sleep, blurring the lines between consciousness and unconsciousness. First and second sleep for a watchman was often interrupted, yet they learned to rest lightly, in brief intervals, adapting to a night that demanded alertness. And the rhythm of work, the sound of bells, and the structured rounds of guards also created patterns for others in the household or village. Sleep was influenced not only by environment and labor but also by those whose job it was to ensure the night passed without disaster. Humans relied on one another in this web of nocturnal cooperation, trusting the presence of others to mediate the unpredictability of darkness. As you imagine yourself lying in a medieval bed, be it straw or feather-stuffed, you can sense their unseen presence. A shadow moves in the corridor, a bell tolls faintly in the distance, footsteps approach then fade away. Safety exists not because the night is controlled, but because it is respected and monitored. The medieval night was not merely a space for rest, it was a space negotiated. Between darkness and light, between fear and comfort, between isolation and vigilance, humans carved out moments of sleep, sustained by the quiet guardians who patrolled, watched, and endured. And as the hours stretched toward dawn, the night watchmen continue their rounds, a silent rhythm threading through the darkness, connecting every home, every chamber, every sleeper in a tapestry of protection and presence, because the night, vast and mysterious, demands it. The medieval night was never uniform. Its darkness was shaped not only by walls, firelight, and ritual but also by something far larger, the weather. Wind, rain, frost, snow, all had a profound, almost physical influence on sleep, shaping comfort, restlessness, and even the timing of first and second sleep. Imagine a small timber home in the dead of winter. Outside, a fierce wind rattles shutters, whistles through gaps in the walls, and bends the skeletal branches of trees. Rain hammers intermittently on the roof, a rhythm both soothing and unsettling, as if the world itself were beating a quiet drum. Within the home, the occupants huddle together under straw and furs, listening carefully. Every gust, every drip, every sudden clap of storm is felt in the body before it is processed in the mind. Sleep becomes reactive, responsive, rather than passive. Temperature is perhaps the most immediate influence. Cold seeps through poorly insulated walls, chilling feet and hands even beneath layers of blankets. Heat from a fire radiates only so far, those farther from embers may shiver, adjusting blankets or curling tighter to conserve warmth. In summer, the opposite occurs, stifling air, thick humidity, and swarms of insects disturb sleep, creating restlessness and short, interrupted slumber. Rain and storms bring both sound and scent. The patter of droplets, the sudden rush of water through gutters, the earthy smell of wet soil, all shape the nocturnal landscape. Some sounds lull sleepers, blending into a rhythm of white noise that deepens rest. Others startle, breaking slumber and prompting vigilance. Snow adds another layer, muffled footsteps, creaking roofs, and the sensation of cold penetrating even thick bedding. Seasonal shifts also dictated the rhythm of life and sleep. Long summer days pushed work into the twilight, delaying the arrival of first sleep. Winters brought earlier nights, extended darkness, and the heightened challenge of cold. Farmers, laborers, and travelers all adapted intuitively, allowing sleep to respond to environmental cues rather than strict schedules. Even dreams were shaped by weather. The sound of wind could bleed into visions of flight or stormy seas. Cold might provoke dreams of wandering, pursuit, or seeking warmth. Heat and stifling air could create fevered, restless dreams. The night, in essence, was an active participant, influencing not only the body but the mind. Weather also shaped communal life and shared sleep. Families adjusted sleeping arrangements according to cold drafts or damp floors. Travelers sought sheltered spots, positioning straw and furs to minimize exposure. Guards and watchmen remained alert to the dangers that storms brought: slippery roads, falling branches, or weakened gates. The night was never passive, it demanded attention, adaptation, and care. Interestingly, weather could also heighten intimacy and comfort. Storms encouraged huddling, layering, and shared warmth. Heavy rain outside made fires more precious, softening soundscapes, creating a cocoon of light, heat, and human presence. Even in adversity, humans found ways to adapt, seeking security in proximity and routine, and yet, unpredictability remained. A sudden wind could extinguish a candle, a downpour might flood a threshold, or frost could seep into bedding. The body and mind adjusted constantly, shaping first and second sleep cycles to accommodate discomfort. Sleep was fluid, responsive, and deeply connected to the natural world. As you lie here now, imagine these winds, rains, and frosts surrounding your own space. Notice how your body instinctively reacts, tightening, relaxing, shifting, responding to cues beyond conscious control. This is the medieval night, alive, reactive, and always intertwined with weather, shaping every moment of rest and every dream that follows. The night was never just darkness. It was storm, frost, heat, and wind. And in its presence, humans learned to sleep, to adapt, and to find calm in the midst of forces beyond their control. The weather dictated the night as much as walls or fire, reminding all who slept that rest is not merely a physical act, but a negotiation with the living, breathing world outside. After hours of storms, wind, and the restless stirrings of animals, there are nights when the medieval world falls into a profound silence, a silence unlike anything we know today. Streets empty, fields darken, animals settle, and even the wind seems to pause. In this stillness, the night takes on a weight, a presence, and a rhythm entirely its own. Imagine lying in a small village home, the fire reduced to faint embers. Your straw bedding is rough beneath you, but the body is heavy with exhaustion. Outside, the world has gone quiet. No carts roll along the dirt road, no distant bells echo, no conversations drift through the air. Only the faint sigh of the wind through the trees. The occasional rustle of a small animal, and your own breath fill the night. This silence is not emptiness. It is alive with awareness. The darkness itself feels thicker, almost tactile. Shadows become more distinct, shapes sharper, and the boundaries between room and world more pronounced. Without constant noise, the mind tunes into subtleties, faint creaks of timbers, distant calls of owls, the rhythmic pulse of one's own heartbeat. Every sound is magnified, yet the overall stillness brings a strange comfort. In villages, silence often followed exhaustion. After the labor of day and the rituals of night, people slept in clusters, bodies pressing warmth into one another. Even when awake between first and second sleep, the quiet was filled with reflection, prayer, or whispered conversation. The absence of artificial sound heightened the experience of the night, deepening both rest and awareness. Silence also shaped dreams. Without constant auditory distraction, the mind could wander into vivid, unbroken landscapes of imagination. dreams became more intense, more layered, more meaningful. First and second sleep were not simply physical rest, they were journeys of perception, reflection, and subconscious exploration. Even in discomfort, the stillness amplified experience, magnifying sensations of warmth, cold, or movement. In castles, silence was different but equally profound. Vast stone corridors, thick tapestries, and secluded chambers absorbed sound, creating an echoing stillness. The hush of a noble chamber at night is almost complete, footsteps distant, fires crackling faintly. Voices muted or absent. Sleep here is expansive, layered with awareness of space, presence, and hierarchy. Even wealth cannot fully escape the demands of darkness, yet silence transforms vigilance into calm. Travelers, huddled under rough blankets on roads or in barns, also experience the unique weight of quiet. Without the sound of nearby village life or bustling streets, the silence becomes immersive, both intimidating and protective. It sharpens perception, deepens rest, and underscores the fragility of human presence in a world where danger could approach unseen. Even weather can deepen silence. Snowfall muffles sound, creating a dreamlike, almost sacred space. Windless nights allow every small noise, the creak of timber, the shifting of straw, the soft breathing of a companion, to register fully. Rain may pause, leaving the world hushed, or distant thunder may fade, emphasizing stillness. The medieval night is alive precisely in this quiet, in the subtle tension between calm and latent presence. And yet, silence is more than absence. It is connection. It is intimacy. It heightens the rhythm of the body and mind, making every movement, breath, and sensation meaningful. It allows first sleep and second sleep to flow naturally, punctuated only by instinct, ritual, or necessity. It reminds humans that night is not merely a backdrop for life, but a space that demands attention, respect, and surrender. As you lie here, imagining this profound silence, notice its effect. The world beyond your bed may be noisy and artificial, but within this meditation, you can feel the weight of darkness, the depth of stillness, and the delicate balance between rest and awareness. The medieval night teaches patience, perception, and presence through its silence, a silence that is alive, layered, and unforgettable. The night, at its deepest, is a quiet companion, shaping sleep, dreams, and consciousness. And within that stillness, humans of the past discovered a rhythm that modern life can barely replicate, a night that is profound, attentive, and alive, even when no one speaks. As the medieval night stretches across villages, castles, and fields, a question emerges: could you, sitting here, in your modern bed, truly adapt to such a life? Could your body and mind surrender to the rhythms of darkness, labor, fear, and ritual that shaped every hour of medieval sleep? Consider first the environment. No soft mattress, no warm central heating, no blackout curtains. Nights could be bitterly cold, damp, or oppressively hot. The straw beneath your back shifts, the cold creeps through cracks in the walls, and the fire's glow only reaches partway across the room. Outside, wind howls, animals stir, and shadows stretch unnervingly across the landscape. Adaptation would demand not only tolerance but attentiveness, a sensitivity to temperature, sound, and subtle movements that modern comforts have dulled. Then, there is the rhythm itself. Forget 8 hours straight through. Instead, imagine first sleep, a waking interlude in the dark, and a second sleep. Hours of quiet wakefulness might be spent tending the fire, whispering prayers, caring for family, or quietly observing the night. Your body, accustomed to artificial lighting and precise alarms, would need to recalibrate, learning patience, responsiveness, and trust in your internal clock. The mind must adjust to long periods without distraction, to reflection, and to being alive in the dark without fear overwhelming action. Fear, in fact, becomes a teacher. Darkness is not empty, it is full of mystery. You would hear every sound more acutely, the scurrying of rats, the shifting of beams, the wind tugging at shutters. Superstitions, spirits, and unseen forces linger in the imagination, shaping behavior, and requiring vigilance. Adaptation here means learning to balance caution with calm, to accept uncertainty while still finding moments of rest. The modern mind, trained to eliminate risk and comfort, might find this deeply unsettling at first. Labor of the day cannot be ignored either. Medieval sleep was intimately tied to work. Exhaustion was natural, necessary, and predictable. Your modern body, used to sitting for hours in artificial light, might struggle to find the same effortless surrender to first sleep. And yet, if you were fully immersed in physical labor, tending fields, carrying water, chopping wood, the body would demand rest with a clarity and intensity modern life rarely offers. Sleep would be earned, not scheduled. Shared spaces present another challenge. Privacy was limited. Family members, strangers, or servants might share your bed or room. You would need to adapt to the constant presence of others, to movements, noises, and habits that modern isolation shields us from. Yet in this proximity, there is warmth, intimacy, and reassurance, a human connection embedded into the very act of resting. Even the wealthy faced adaptation. Feather-stuffed mattresses, tapestries, and warmth softened the night, but vigilance remained. Guards, storms, or distant intrusions reminded sleepers that danger and unpredictability are universal. Adaptation is not simply a matter of comfort, it is attunement to rhythm, awareness, and presence. Could you adapt mentally to the silence, the shadows, the absence of entertainment? Could you find calm in unlit hours, trust your body's cues, and embrace first and second sleep without anxiety? Could you listen to the wind? It is possible, but it would require patience, humility, and a surrender to rhythms long forgotten. You would need to shift from a life of convenience and constant stimulation to one of observation, endurance, and intimate engagement with the night. It is not merely about surviving the dark, it is about learning to live with it, to move in concert with its unpredictability, to treat rest as a negotiation, a dialogue, and a daily ritual. And perhaps that is the most remarkable lesson of all. Medieval sleep was not merely about slumber. It was a living, breathing practice, responsive to work, weather, ritual, fear, comfort, and community. Adaptation is not just physical, it is psychological, emotional, and spiritual. As you lie here now, in a quiet, modern room, imagine a night without alarm clocks, artificial light, or soft mattresses. Imagine the long stretches of darkness, the wakefulness, the shadows, and the occasional fear. Could you surrender? Could you trust the rhythm? Could you find calm in the mysterious, alive, and demanding night of centuries past? The question lingers. And as sleep draws you closer, the answer begins quietly within you. As the night winds down and our journey through medieval sleep draws to a close, it's time to reflect on what we've discovered. Across centuries, darkness has been far more than a backdrop for rest. It has been alive, shaping bodies, minds, communities, and rituals. From the humblest straw bedding in a village hut to the opulent feather-stuffed mattresses of the wealthy, sleep has always been a delicate dance between comfort, awareness, and the mysteries of the night. Consider the rhythms we explored: first sleep, a quiet interlude in the deep hours of darkness, and second sleep, where rest resumes with gentle inevitability. We saw how labor, weather, superstition, prayer, and even dreams shaped the way humans surrendered themselves to the night. Every creak of timber, every flicker of candlelight, every chill or warmth influenced rest, guiding the body and mind through cycles both physical and spiritual. The medieval night teaches us something modern life often forgets, that sleep is not simply a commodity, a scheduled block of hours on a calendar. It is an experience, a practice, a negotiation with the unknown. It is shaped by the world around us, the wind outside the window, the presence of others, the weight of the day's labor, and the rhythms of our own bodies. It is intimate, communal, and profoundly human. We also saw contrasts: the cramped intimacy of village life versus the guarded grandeur of castles, the vigilance of night watchmen, the endurance required for travelers on the road, and the protective rituals of prayer and superstition. Through all of this, a pattern emerges: humans have always adapted to night, not simply endured it. Sleep is both fragile and resilient, vulnerable yet necessary, shaped by fear and comfort alike. And so, as you reflect on these stories, perhaps you can feel a connection across time. The sound of wind, the flicker of candlelight, the quiet rustle of bedding, these are not just medieval experiences, they are echoes of our own human need for rest, safety, and renewal. Sleep is a constant, a companion that has traveled with us through centuries of change. Tonight, as you settle into your own bed, remember that the night is alive. Let the rhythms of your body guide you. Embrace the quiet, the shadows, the stillness, and the gentle unfolding of dreams. Let your thoughts drift, as they did for those who lived long ago, and let your body surrender to rest. The medieval night, in all its complexity, reminds us to cherish sleep, not just as a necessity, but as a living, breathing part of life. To trust it, to respect it, and to allow ourselves to be carried gently through darkness into calm, renewal, and dream. And now, as the embers of our journey fade and the shadows of the past recede, it's time to let your own night unfold. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and feel the weight of your body sinking into rest. Let the stillness embrace you. Let the quiet